I want you to step outside for a second. Well, at least in your imagination. And just take a look at your car.
Right. Just picture it sitting right there in your driveway.
Exactly. Because usually, when we look at our cars, we just see pure utility.
Yes, just the machine that gets you to work or, hauls the groceries.
Or takes the kids to practice. Or maybe it's just a source of stress when you hear that weird rattle under the hood.
Oh, for sure. We've all been there.
Right. But I want you to consider completely reimagining what that piece of metal actually is.
Because it really is changing.
It is. What if, instead of just a vehicle, that machine is actually a shield against global energy crises?
Wow, yeah, that is a big shift.
Or, a critical lever for a nation's independence?
Right.
What if it's evolving past being a car entirely and it's basically becoming this rolling, hyper-connected supercomputer?
I mean, it requires a massive perspective shift, to be honest.
It really does.
Because we are just so conditioned by literally a century of history to view the automobile as this purely mechanical, gas-burning asset.
Right, something that just depreciates the second you drive it off the lot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the very definition of mobility as well is being rewritten right in front of us.
And that structural shift is exactly what we are exploring in this deep dive.
It's a huge topic.
It is. I was recently going through the latest Global EV Outlook, which is published by the International Energy Agency.
The IEA, yeah. They put out incredible data.
They really do. And the numbers, they just stop you in your tracks.
They're staggering.
We are officially out of the early adoption phase, like completely.
Yeah, the era of the electric vehicle just being this niche toy for tech enthusiasts, that's totally over.
Right. We are looking at projections of 23 million units sold globally in a single year.
23 million. That's just wild.
It is. That means we are approaching a reality where nearly 30% of all new cars sold on the planet are electric.
Which, is an economic and technological revolution happening at a speed we just rarely see in heavy industry.
Yeah, 30% market penetration globally tells us this isn't just about environmental mandates anymore.
Not at all. Or early adopter enthusiasm. It is being driven by raw economics.
So let's pull the thread on those economics a bit.
Sure.
Because a shift of that magnitude means everyday consumers are, fundamentally changing their buying habits.
Right. If 1 in 4 new cars sold globally recently was electric, that's regular people buying them.
Exactly. Everyday families. People who are just looking for reliable, affordable transport are finally pulling the trigger.
Yeah, and we know they're looking for relief from volatile fuel prices.
But for a long time, the EV had this massive, premium-only stigma attached to it.
Oh, absolutely. It was seen as a luxury item.
Right. So what is mechanically happening behind the scenes to drag the price of these vehicles down into the mainstream?
Well, the answer lies almost entirely in the chemistry and the scale of the battery.
The battery itself.
Yeah. The battery pack has historically been the absolute most expensive component of an electric vehicle.
Right.
But we are seeing this massive shift in how these batteries are actually engineered.
How so?
Well, automakers and battery manufacturers have heavily transitioned toward lithium iron phosphate or LFP chemistries.
Okay, so they're changing the actual ingredients of the battery.
Exactly. Because older battery tech relied heavily on these incredibly expensive and, frankly, ethically and geographically complex materials.
Like cobalt. Right?
Yeah, cobalt and nickel. But LFP batteries, they strip a lot of that out.
Oh, wow. So what do they use instead?
They use iron and phosphate, which are, super abundant and really cheap.
That makes a ton of sense.
Now, they might have slightly less energy density than the premium cobalt batteries.
So maybe a fraction less range.
Right, exactly. But they are significantly cheaper to produce, highly durable, and much less prone to degradation.
Kind of reminds me of when flat-screen TVs first came out.
Oh, how so?
Well, at first, they were this insane luxury item, but once the underlying technology became cheap enough to manufacture at scale, they just became the default choice.
That is a perfect analogy, actually, because when you combine that cheaper LFP chemistry with the sheer scale of modern gigafactories,
Pumping out millions of cells a day.
right, the cost per kilowatt hour just plummets.
Which means the sticker price finally comes down to earth for the average buyer.
Exactly.
But the sticker price is only half the battle for a family.
That's true.
If you look at a household budget, it's the unpredictability that really causes stress.
Oh, for sure. You never know if global events are going to send the price of a gallon of gas spiking overnight.
Right. And that unpredictability is exactly what the EV eliminates.
Yes. You basically swap a variable, highly volatile cost like gasoline for a relatively stable, predictable cost, which is residential electricity.
Because if you charge at home overnight, your fuel cost is just locked into your local utility rate.
Exactly. But the savings mechanism actually goes deeper than just the fuel.
Really? How so?
It's the architecture of the drivetrain itself.
Because an internal combustion engine it's essentially a controlled explosion box with thousands of tiny moving metal parts.
That's exactly what it is. Hundreds of parts that vibrate, they heat up, they require constant lubrication.
And eventually they wear out or break.
Right. But an electric motor has a fraction of those moving parts.
Yeah.
There are no oil changes, no spark plugs, no timing belts, no multi-gear transmissions to fail.
So the day-to-day running costs and the long-term maintenance costs just drop off a cliff.
They really do. So for a family, buying an EV is no longer just this eco-conscious luxury.
It is a highly practical protective measure for the household wallet.
Spot on.
Well, if we follow that logic, a family saving money on gas means that household is demanding less petroleum.
Yes, exactly.
And you scale that up to millions of families, and suddenly entire cities and then whole countries are demanding less petroleum.
Which brings us to a fascinating macro-level shift.
Right, because how does the car parked in your driveway actually disrupt the global chessboard?
It strikes at the very heart of national energy security.
Okay, unpack that for us.
Well, historically, if a country's entire transportation network runs on petroleum, that country's economy is entirely at the mercy of foreign oil cartels.
And global supply shocks.
Right. A conflict on the other side of the world can instantly cause a recession at home because the cost of moving goods and people just skyrockets.
So the EV is essentially a geopolitical shield.
It really is.
By electrifying transport, a nation systematically uncouples its domestic economy from the volatility of the global oil market.
Yes, it is a structural defense mechanism.
Wow.
Policymakers are realizing that every internal combustion vehicle they replace with an EV is a permanent reduction in their baseline demand for imported oil.
Okay, I hear the theory, and it sounds great on paper, but
Yeah.
looking at the IEA data, I have to push back hard on this idea of true independence.
Okay, let's hear it.
Let's look at the actual supply chain numbers, what we might call the China paradox.
Right. The supply chain is heavily concentrated.
Heavily is an understatement. We want energy independence, yet the data points out that Chinese automakers supplied roughly 60% of all electric cars sold worldwide last year.
Yes, they did.
And going further, nearly 75% of all EV production happened in China.
The numbers are massive.
But here is the truly staggering figure. Over 80% of global battery cell production is controlled by China.
It's a huge monopoly, essentially.
So if we are relying on a single nation for 80% of the core technology powering our transportation, we aren't achieving independence.
I see your point.
We are just trading a dependence on foreign oil for a dependence on foreign batteries.
That is the defining geopolitical tension of this entire industry right now.
Right.
Because you really cannot separate the climate goals from the industrial reality.
How do you mean?
Well, on one side of the ledger, China's massive foresight and strategic investment in the entire supply chain.
Like not just building cars, right?
Exactly, not just cars. They dominate the refining of critical minerals, too, like lithium, nickel, and graphite.
Wow.
And that has created an economy of scale that no one else can currently match.
So that efficiency is what drove global battery prices down in the first place.
Right. Their affordable exports are the reason EV adoption is accelerating so fast globally.
But the flip side is a massive vulnerability.
A critical vulnerability.
Yeah.
For Western nations and emerging markets alike.
Yeah.
Relying on a single country for the bedrock of their future transportation infrastructure is just an unacceptable strategic risk.
It completely undermines their industrial resilience.
Exactly.
But this is where the math just doesn't seem to work for me.
Why is that?
Well, Western governments are throwing up tariffs on Chinese EVs to protect their domestic legacy automakers, right?
Yes, we're seeing a lot of trade barriers going up.
Because they want to build their own supply chains. But building a gigafactory, permitting a lithium mine, establishing a refining industry from scratch, that takes a decade, maybe more.
It's incredibly slow, yes.
And we don't have a decade if we want to hit the aggressive emission reduction targets those same governments have set. So how do you reconcile that?
You are identifying the impossible choice facing policymakers right now.
It seems like a total catch-22.
It really is. Do you embrace cheap, imported EVs to hit your climate targets and give your consumers affordable cars?
Knowing it might hollow out your domestic auto industry.
Exactly. Or do you put up trade barriers to protect your manufacturing base and build your own domestic supply chain?
Which means making EVs way more expensive for your citizens and delaying your climate goals by years.
Right. It's an economic tightrope.
It really is.
And the practical result we are seeing is this massive, frantic scramble to onshore battery production.
Like with the subsidies we're seeing everywhere.
Yes, unprecedented subsidies globally. Policies designed specifically to force the supply chain to decouple and localize.
So the battery really has become the new barrel of oil.
It has. And the race to secure its components is actively rewriting global trade alliances.
Now, that race dictates where the physical hardware of the car comes from.
Right.
But the IEA research highlights a second revolution happening simultaneously, and it has nothing to do with the battery plant.
Oh,
It
absolutely.
has to do with the dashboard,
No.
because we are moving into the era of the software-defined vehicle.
Yeah, the physical hardware of the car. I mean, the battery, the motor, the chassis, it's rapidly becoming commoditized.
Right, a battery is a battery.
Exactly.
Hmm.
The true battleground for dominance in the next generation of mobility is the software layer that sits on top of that hardware.
You know, when I think of automotive software, I usually just think of like a clunky navigation screen.
Oh, most people do.
Oh.
But this is something entirely different.
Yeah, if we try to visualize this, it's less like a smartphone and honestly more like a biological immune system.
Oh, that's interesting. How do you mean?
Well, think about the human body. Your white blood cells are constantly monitoring your system, detecting a virus, and reacting before you even realize you're getting sick.
Right.
In a software-defined vehicle, you have this incredibly complex network of sensors doing what they call sensor fusion.
Yes. Gathering massive amounts of data.
Exactly. So the car isn't just reacting to a broken part anymore.
It's predicting it.
Yeah. It's using predictive AI to analyze, like, the microvibrations in the steering column or the thermal output of the braking system.
So it knows a wheel bearing is going to fail 3 months before it actually snaps.
Exactly. It schedules its own maintenance, or it adapts its battery cooling strategy based on the specific topography of the route you were navigating.
That is an excellent way to frame it.
Right.
The vehicle basically becomes a highly intelligent, self-optimizing node on a network.
And because these systems are integrated through application programming interfaces or APIs, the car's capabilities are never static.
Not at all. Through over-the-air updates, the manufacturer can rewrite the algorithms managing the electric motor literally overnight.
Which is wild to think about.
It is. You could wake up and your car suddenly accelerates 10% faster or has 20 more miles of range purely because the software became more efficient while you were sleeping.
But wait, if the software is that deeply embedded and the manufacturer can alter the car's performance remotely, doesn't that fundamentally break the traditional concept of ownership?
It absolutely does.
Wow.
Because you are no longer buying a standalone mechanical product that slowly degrades over 10 years until you scrap it.
Right.
You are essentially subscribing to a digital platform.
A drivable subscription.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this leads to a highly disruptive conclusion.
Which is?
The legacy automakers, the companies that have spent 100 years perfecting the stamping of metal and the machining of combustion engines,
Yeah.
they are suddenly finding themselves at a massive disadvantage.
Because bending metal is a completely different skill set than writing predictive AI code.
Precisely. The companies that will dominate the next decade of mobility might not be traditional car manufacturers at all.
That's crazy to think about.
They will be data companies, tech giants who know how to manage cloud infrastructure, process massive amounts of fleet data, and create seamless digital ecosystems.
So the legacy brands either have to reinvent themselves as software companies, or they just become the hardware suppliers for tech firms that actually own the user experience.
Exactly. It's an existential threat to these century-old brands.
It really is. Now, everything we've discussed so far, the geopolitical tension, the advanced AI dashboards, the family economics, it's really easy to view this entirely through a Western lens.
Oh, for sure. We
Yeah.
tend to just picture sleek sedans in suburban driveways.
Right. But to truly understand the global shift based on this IEA data, we have to look beyond the suburbs.
I do.
Because the data shows the market is geographically exploding in some pretty unexpected places.
The diversification is actually one of the most compelling aspects of the current landscape.
How so?
Well, while adoption rates might fluctuate in some of the more established markets due to shifting subsidy policies, the global map is just lighting up.
We are seeing incredible surges.
We are. Look at recent data, where regions like Latin America saw sales jump 75%.
Wow, 75%.
Yeah, or the Asia-Pacific region outside of China rocketing up 80%.
So what is driving that specific regional
It's
explosion?
a great question.
Because, I mean, a country in Latin America or Southeast Asia has vastly different infrastructure challenges than a city in Europe, right?
Absolutely. It comes down to localized manufacturing and really the diversification of vehicle types.
Meaning they aren't just buying sedans.
Exactly. The EV revolution in these regions isn't just about luxury passenger cars. It's about fundamentally rethinking localized transport.
Give me an example.
Well, for instance, the most highly electrified segment of road transport globally isn't actually cars at all.
Wait, really? What is it?
It's two- and three-wheelers.
Oh, of course.
Oh,
Which
yeah.
are the absolute backbone of daily mobility and commerce in dense, developing economies.
Yes. If you were in Southeast Asia, electrifying a fleet of delivery scooters or three-wheeled transit vehicles delivers immediate, massive benefits.
I can imagine.
It slashes urban air pollution. It dramatically lowers daily operational costs for small businesses.
And I assume it requires significantly less grid infrastructure to charge compared to, like, a massive SUV.
Exactly. You don't need a supercharger for a scooter.
Right. But speaking of massive, the report also highlights heavy industry, right?
Yes, the electrification of commercial fleets.
I think this is where a lot of people really scratch their heads
Oh, for sure.
because it's one thing to power a sedan, but how on earth do you electrify an 80,000-pound freight truck?
It sounds impossible, right?
Yeah, doesn't the battery have to be so massive and heavy that you sacrifice all your cargo capacity?
Well, that was definitely the conventional wisdom 5 years ago.
But things have changed.
Dramatically.
Yeah.
Energy density, which is the amount of power you can pack into a specific physical footprint and weight, has improved drastically.
Okay.
And furthermore, the logistics industry is highly predictable. Freight trucks often run fixed routes.
Ah, so they don't need a battery that goes 1,000 miles in any random direction.
Exactly. They just need to get to the next distribution hub.
That changes the math completely.
It does. And the technology deploying now involves what we call megawatt charging systems.
Megawatt charging, that sounds intense.
They're incredibly powerful charging stations located at strategic points along freight corridors.
So they can just blast immense amounts of energy into a truck's battery while it is being loaded or unloaded?
Exactly. And the result is that a significant percentage of new heavy trucks sold globally are now electric.
Really? I had no idea.
Yeah, this is quietly revolutionizing urban logistics and pulling massive amounts of diesel consumption out of the global equation.
Wow. But, whether it's a million electric scooters in Southeast Asia, a fleet of heavy freight trucks in Europe, or just suburban families in the U.S., it all leads to the same unavoidable bottleneck,
Which is?
the grid.
Ah, yes.
The IEA projects that we could see a global fleet of over 500 million electric vehicles by the middle of the next decade.
500 million rolling batteries.
Exactly. You can't just plug all of those into our current infrastructure and expect the lights to stay on.
No, you can't. That is the ultimate limiting factor right now.
The physical production of the vehicles is outpacing the modernization of the electrical grid.
Dropping millions of high-capacity batteries onto aging infrastructure is honestly a recipe for catastrophic failure.
So what is the actual practical path forward here?
Because digging up every street in the world to lay thicker copper wires isn't going to happen overnight.
Definitely not.
The solution is a combination of hardware upgrades and software intelligence.
Okay, hardware and software.
Yes, we need exactly. The grid needs to send a signal to the car saying, demand is too high right now, do not charge.
Oh, that's smart.
Or conversely, it's 3 a.m., the wind turbines are spinning, we have an excess of cheap power, charge now.
So by using API integration and time of use rates, we can smooth out the demand curve and prevent the grid from collapsing during peak hours.
Precisely. The ecosystem has to evolve alongside the vehicle.
Well, let's step back for a second and just look at the sheer scale of the journey we've just mapped out in this deep dive.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. We started by looking at that car in your driveway as a simple utility. But pulling apart this data, we see that the electric vehicle has shed its luxury status to become an economic shield for the everyday family.
It really has.
It is acting as a geopolitical lever, allowing nations to systematically uncouple their economies from volatile global oil cartels.
Yes.
And it is fundamentally transforming the industrial landscape, replacing century-old metal bending with predictive AI and software ecosystems.
When you synthesize all of those elements, it becomes clear that this is a unified response to a set of simultaneous global crises.
Exactly.
It addresses the climate crisis through emission reduction.
Right.
It addresses the energy security crisis by localizing fuel sources.
And it addresses the cost of living crisis by stabilizing the mechanics of personal transport.
The momentum of this structural shift is locked in.
The question for the next decade isn't whether the transition will happen, but which nations, which legacy companies, and which consumers will adapt fast enough to survive this new mobility order.
It really is a new mobility order.
But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with one final, pretty provocative concept to chew on.
Oh, I like this one.
We've talked about your future car as a digital platform and a shield against oil shocks. We've talked about the challenge of drawing power from the grid.
Right.
But let's flip that dynamic completely on its head.
Okay.
Think about vehicle-to-grid, or V2G technology.
Yeah.
If your future vehicle is essentially a massive, highly efficient battery connected to a digital AI network, and it's plugged into your house, well, could your car become a decentralized mini power plant?
It's a fascinating idea.
Imagine a scenario where the local utility needs power during a severe heat wave to prevent a blackout. Your car's AI negotiates a premium price, and while you are sleeping, it actually discharges a portion of its stored energy back into the city grid.
And you wake up, and your car hasn't just retained enough charge to get you to work, it has actively sold electricity and deposited money into your bank account.
It completely destroys the century-old reality of a car being a depreciating liability that constantly drains your wallet.
It totally flips the script.
Imagine looking out your window at that machine in the driveway, knowing that it isn't just taking you to work, it is working for you.
That is a very powerful thought.
Something to process the next time you turn the key, or I guess push the button. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one.